I declare open this public hearing of the Standing Committee on Communications and the Arts for the inquiry into the challenges and opportunities within the Australian live music industry. I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples as the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today and pay my respects to their ancestors and elders past, present and future. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be with us today, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their cultural and spiritual connections to lands, waters and seas. By way of introduction, I'm Brian Mitchell, Chair of the Committee. I'll just quickly get my other members to introduce themselves.
Hello, Susan Templeman, the member for Macquarie in the Blue Mountains and Hawkesbury and the Special Envoy for the Arts.
And
good morning and thanks for being with us. I'm Libby Coker. I'm the member for Corangamite, which takes in Torquay, Great Ocean Road, Bellarine in Victoria.
Good morning. I now call the representative from Humanitix. For the Hansard record, could you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Hello everyone, thank you for inviting me along today. My name is Adam McCurdy. I'm co-CEO and co-founder of Humanitix. We're a Sydney-based events ticketing platform who's the ticketing provider for thousands of events across the country. Unique, we give away all of our profits to local charities, which is a very nice addition to arts making an impact in our community.
Thank you, Adam. As these proceedings are public, they are being broadcast and recorded by Hansard. If you wish to have evidence heard in private, please let the committee know and we will consider your request. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I wish to advise you this hearing is a formal proceeding of the Parliament and giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. If you object to answering a question, please state the reasons for your objection and the committee will consider the matter. Before inviting you to make an opening statement of this, I'll just check we have no other members online or anything, inquiry? No? We just three of us? All right. Adam, do you have an opening statement that you'd like to make? I know we've sort of thrown you at the deep end and inviting you along today, but do you have an introductory statement at all? Or?
Yeah, it's pretty scary. It's my first one of these, so there you go.
Relax, we're all very nice people.
Yeah, no, it's great. Honestly, I'm just really happy to just share our experience and our perspective as a result from what we do and obviously our opinion on the matter based on what we see and what we think is fair. But I mean, in a nutshell, everything that we've seen suggests that dynamic pricing should not be allowed. It's not good for consumers. It's a horrific experience and it's an incredibly one-sided situation where a platform can dynamically price their events in a range of different ways. We're seeing creative ways that dynamic pricing is being used by various providers to kind of make the case that this is a different thing. Everything that we've seen is it's all the same, and that it's not good for consumers. And to me, it's a very consistent extension of regulation on pricing displays, as shown in the ACCC's pricing display regulation. And it's just a logical extension of, I think as the ACCC puts it, businesses must communicate clear and accurate prices prior to purchase. They must not mislead consumers about their prices. That is what dynamic pricing does.
Okay. Look, thank you so much for that. And we've invited you here today. I asked the Secretariat to invite you because I've seen the media reports about your comments, about your emergence in the market. Could you tell us a little bit about Humanitix, who you are, how you came about, why you came about, and what difference you're hoping to make in the market?
So Humanitix, we're an Australian events ticketing platform, and that means that we're a ticketing platform used across the whole country by a range of different event hosts. That could be large music festivals, most recently Strawberry Fields Music and Arts Festival that happened last week as a client of ours with tens of thousands of people in attendance, all the way down to a candle making workshop for 5 people in a rural town, and everything in between with institutions, you name it, using ticketing as a way to capture registrations for their live event experience, whatever that live event experience could be. The reason we started the organisation back in 2016 was that we saw an opportunity to transform what, just put it bluntly, most people don't like their engagement with a ticketing company, is what we found. And we thought, what if we could create a non-profit events ticketing platform, Australian-based, that's not owned by shareholders, not trading its equity in order to seek to enrich its owners, and rather practice in a way that is fair for consumers, better for event hosts, and then also, as a result of not having to pay out shareholders, redistributing all of the profits that the organisation makes from booking fees into the best frontline charities that we can find and partner up with. And we thought if that's possible, we would then be able to redirect millions, tens of millions, hopefully one day billions of dollars from previously resented booking fees into some of the most impactful charity partners available, really transforming an industry into making a whole bunch more good than anyone ever thought possible. This year alone, we've just given away over $10 million, which we're about to announce more publicly. Maybe I've jumped the gun on that one. But next week, you'll see that. It's been remarkably successful, and as a result, we've expanded into New Zealand, the US, and soon to be the UK, with event hosts seeing this as a breath of fresh air and consumers appreciating it for obvious reasons as well.
So in terms of what you do compared to what other ticketing agencies do, you both... You can just explain whether you do things differently other than the profit and non-profit side of it, but just in terms of the mechanics of what you do. Because I'm just trying to think what they would say is, it would be unsustainable to do things a certain way. We've got to charge X amount in order to exist in the market, and there'd be doom and gloom if we didn't do things that particular way. You seem to be breaking that model, and you're saying you're giving away $10 million, which is an extraordinary amount.
Just this year alone.
Just this year alone, and how big are you in the market compared to others?
Sure. So this is why it's very interesting and unique. So event hosts will use Humanitix instead of another ticketing provider. So in order for us to be competitive and win the ticketing contract for an event, let's say Strawberry Fields, like it happened last weekend, Strawberry Fields needs to be compelled that Humanitix can be the best ticketing provider for them, which means, like all the other ticketing providers, we need to provide a phenomenal platform, great technology, great service. There's then price, where it comes to the booking fees, which are notoriously resented in the industry. And that's where we've brought booking fees down significantly. So ultimately, we are a ticketing platform needing to be competitive in order to be used by event hosts. Yeah. Event hosts typically only use one ticketing company to ticket for their event. And so it's an incredibly competitive zero-sum game process where we compete with the rest of them. Uniquely, we're non-profit, and uniquely, we've set up with an intention to be in the best interests of consumers, event hosts, and then the wider community for our event, through our charity donations, which places us in a unique position to say, well, sure, there's opportunities where we can make more profit. Humanitix has to make a profit in order for us to make impact through our giving to donation partners. So the argument that Humanitix is in a unique position that we don't care about profit is silly. I just told you this year alone we've given away $10 million. That's all from profit. We don't make profit as a business by providing a great service, decent pricing, etc. Then we don't make social impact, and that's the whole reason why we exist. However, we would never trade making more profit through a practice that is unfair for consumers. And that's what places us in a unique position. I'm not going to screw a consumer in order to increase our donation amount to a charity partner. And that's the unique dynamic of Humanitix here. Whereas, perhaps in another business, you might make that move to enrich oneself.
And I'm going on to my colleagues in a moment, but just very quickly, you mentioned that you'd brought down booking prices significantly for consumers. Do you have a metric of that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, our headline pricing is 4% plus 99 cents per paid ticket, which includes all the credit card processing fees, etc. And then those fees come down significantly from there. There's a range of players out there where, depending on the shape and size of the event, they charge a huge range of fees. I can get a lot of those details to you, but it's a significantly lower fee. A lot of the event hosts who switch to us are doing it often just purely based on price, because that's a really nice thing to lower booking fees in the market.
Thank you. Ms. Templeman.
And that's just But that's just more part of a competitive process where that's just a healthy movement for fees to go to in the industry.
I think it's fascinating. I could keep here all day, but I'll go to Mr.
Well, in fact, I need to disclose, I just used your platform before I came to this hearing to purchase tickets to a charity event in Blackheath for Kindle Hill private school, a little school doing great things around recycling. And so it was just...
There you go.
It is a very easy platform to use, I have to say. But what I'm interested in, from a live music perspective, have you got any sense of the proportion of events on your platform that might fall under the live music category versus all the other incredible things that are there?
No, I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can come back to you with those exact figures.
Look, if it's possible to get an indication, that's great. What I want to explore is whether...
Typically, by the way, well, just to add some colour to that, so typically the live music festivals, music events that we ticket for are typically larger music festivals, like I just referenced, the likes of Strawberry Fields, down to smaller regional folk festivals and these types of events. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to compete with big stadiums because they are locked away with ticketing companies that you probably know. So we don't have the ability to compete and offer our services in that part of the market. So in many regards, we're locked out of the majority of live music, given that live music, the bigger acts predominantly happen at the largest stadiums that have their own arrangements, which is perhaps a whole other conversation. But that's why we would love to be doing more ticketing, and our platform would be great for the largest stadiums. But there are different forces at play there.
Well, that was exactly what I wanted to ask you about, any structural barriers that you encounter in terms of being able to be the ticketing provider for other, and as you've noted, larger events. And in terms of how that works, is that just something that you know as a fact and that anyone who is using those venues takes as a fact, and they don't try to, there's just no capacity for people to choose an alternate ticketing vendor than the one that's locked in to that venue?
When you say people, do you mean consumers? Do you mean the producer of the event?
Yeah, producers or presenters of events.
Typically the answer is no, but again, it kind of depends. So as you've seen kind of in like the Live Nation situation, many times they would own the venue and often own the artist and then obviously own Ticketmaster. So Ticketmaster will obviously ticket everything happening at the large venue for an artist that's a Live Nation artist that's now to be ticketed by Ticketmaster. So there's that dynamic. And there's other dynamics where a larger ticketing company might have done a large deal with a stadium with millions of dollars upfront cash to then own the ticketing for a very long period of time. And then they have full kind of capability to run the ticketing the way they want to run the ticketing for that period because they've fronted up a lot of cash to purchase being the only ticketing provider to be able to ticket at that venue. That's a very common dynamic as well. In all of those dynamics, it means that ultimately the venue has done a deal with a large ticketing provider, and that ticketing provider then sits as the only ticketing company that can ticket for that venue. Depending on the ownership of the venue, depending on the acts coming in and out of the venue, those deals can look and smell different. I'm not privy to obviously the full spectrum of those types of deals, but just to give you a sense of my current knowledge and understanding of the types of deals that are done, that's what we're talking about. And that means that a Humanitix ticketing company in that context is a producer. It doesn't matter if I'm best friends with Taylor Swift. If she comes to play at a major stadium in Australia, he goes, "Hey, Adam, love your company," but I don't have a choice. Neither does anyone have a choice. We're locked in here, and we have to abide by whatever ticketing practices the ticketing company wants to do. And obviously, the ticketing company is often in a position where, well, as there's no choice, it kind of creates a localized monopoly style of business because there's no other choice, which is an interesting dynamic that occurs when a ticketing company has the sole rights to ticket a venue for a very long period of time.
You touched on the example of, even if someone's your best friend, they can't change the structures that are in place. Are you aware of performers who might be very attracted to the values that your platform carries, who have had discussions with you, or that I guess it's just your level of awareness, whether there have been people who've gone, I would really like to use it, but it's been made clear to them that they're not able to shift the existing structures?
Absolutely. It happens all the time. And I mentioned that, despite them being my best friend, I didn't mean that where we do a dodgy deal. I just meant that as just to share the total lack of choice was the context of that point. And so that happens all the time. But to be quite honest, it's not explored very seriously, because most often it's like, oh my God, I would just love to team up with Humanitix, and that aligns so much with our values, etc. But we know it's not possible. So yeah, let's do that. And everyone moves on with their day. So it's a very defeatist, common conversation that ends very quickly, and everyone moves on with their day because this is what it is.
Just when you think about, given your experience and you think about those structural barriers, do you see, what is the flow-on effect you analysed goes to consumers as a result of the current structures and the role you're playing? What are the respective flow-on effects to consumers in terms of either access to tickets or pricing of tickets or any of those things?
In terms of the dynamic of only one ticketing company being able to ticket a large venue and what those trickle down effects are?
I guess the difference between the places where there is some competition and the places where there's not competition. I mean, just your thinking about the consequences that has for consumers.
Oh, sure. Well, the consequences are quite apparently a poorer ticketing experience. I can, as a ticketing company, force you to create an account on my ticketing platform if you want tickets. And that's, we don't do that, for example, because it's not a very competitive thing to do. And it's not nice to force somebody to create an account with Humanitix if they want to buy a ticket to whatever. Like, for example, that Blue Mountains show that you just went to, the charity event. Imagine if I forced you to create a Humanitix account in order to get tickets. Now, if you really wanted to go to that event hard enough, and I'm the only ticketing provider that does that, I can do things like that. I can force you to create an account. I can drip price, which thankfully has been taken away now. I still see it a lot, for what it's worth. There's a lot of drip pricing going around, but thankfully the government has made that official, that that's not acceptable. And I can basically just take it. What's possible is to take advantage of a monopolistic situation. Now, if you zoom out far enough, the argument can be made, well, hang on a minute, that's not technically a monopoly, because all the ticketing companies could have bid to win the contract for this, and lots of deals are being done to try to decide who the ticketing company of the venue is. So at a high enough perspective, it's technically not a monopoly, because the winner of the ticketing contract was the winner of the ticketing contract. But the nature of this dynamic is, once there is a winner, then the winner gets to behave like a monopolist to the consumers that have to put up with whatever practices they choose, and that can be taken advantage of depending on how desperate people are to attend an event. That's ultimately the challenge, and that's where you get things like dynamic pricing, and there'll be more unique innovations, supposedly in the interests of consumers, that are just simply not. It's just another way to make more money and take advantage of people who really want to go to a show and don't have a choice of where to get their tickets from. The bottom line.
Libby?
I've got more if there's time later.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Adam, for being with us today. Just following on from Ms Templeman's line of questioning relating to the ticketing companies, it's obviously challenging for you to compete with companies like Ticketek and Ticketmaster to win big ticketing, events, ticketed events. But you started in 2016, and I'm just wondering what are the factors back then that allowed your company to grow, and the dynamic's really different now, I think, and I'm just wanting you to talk about, do you think that a company such as yours could start up now under the current conditions?
I've got it. Yeah. So, how do I succinctly answer this question? So, what has allowed our company to grow and be as successful as it's been has been an incredibly conscious strategy that is also well documented since the beginning, to not waste our time trying to compete for large stadium contracts with the likes of Ticketek and Ticketmaster. It is completely, in our opinion, as a strategy, is a completely impenetrable fortress, and we would just lose a lot of money. However, all the events that don't happen at a large stadium are of a completely different nature, and that's everything from a music festival like Strawberry Fields that happens out in a field next to the Murray River. It's a gorgeous spot. All the way down to a charity event in Blackheath. And in that area of ticketing, that is still very much a thriving, dynamic, free market where event hosts have true choice that if they don't like the experience they had with a ticketing provider last month or last year, they can switch to a different ticketing provider. And that, therefore, if we come into the market with a compelling point of difference and a compelling product, we can start to have event hosts start to use Humanitix instead. And so we started very intentionally with very small community events. And as we built out the sophistication of the platform, then started to gather the attention of larger and larger, more sophisticated events, but always knowing that the ceiling is events that happen at large stadiums. Ironically, it's a completely different category of events. And we'll get our hands on what we can because we've got a great product and there's a great value proposition, and hosts want to use us, and artists and entertainers would love to use us and do use us where possible. But it's an interesting dynamic of the industry that there are really two categories of the industry. And the reason we were able to thrive is because we intentionally ignored the large stadium category. Now, can a business do what we did in today's landscape, to the last part of your question? Yes, so long as they adopt the same strategy as we did, which is ignore competing with Ticketek and Ticketmaster because you'll get crushed.
Can I ask you, you talk about your ticketing, that you try to keep your ticketing at a reasonable price. I mean, how do you manage that in a competitive world? There must be some escalating costs for you.
What do you mean by keeping our ticketing at a competitive price? You're talking about the booking fees, which is the revenue model of the ticketing platform, and what we charge and take?
Yes.
Yeah, as it turns out, there was fortunes of margin to play with to have a significantly lower price and still make a great profit and run a great business. That was the key insight of the industry, and why. And that's why we thought it to be such a compelling industry to create a social enterprise in. Social enterprise to me is a very fascinating and awesome business model. And we thought applying it in an industry that's technology driven, has all those scale benefits, as well as in an industry that has these huge profit margins where there's a lot to play with, both in discounts and then profit you can still make, and then donations you can give away to charity to make impact. That just seemed to be a really nice industry for a social enterprise to enter the play as a true non-profit. And that's why it was so compelling. And that's why we've done so well. However, the Ticketek Live Nation area of town, end of the market, as you put it, is for all intents and purposes, I was going to ask you about Live Nation. You're obviously aware of the Four Corners program, the ABC program that recently reported on Live Nation. Would you agree or disagree with the conclusions and the analysis in their reporting about Live Nation and how it's impacting the festival scene? I can't remember precisely all of the exact details of their conclusions and ultimate takeaways, so I can't speak confidently about whether or not I wholeheartedly agree with the precise conclusions. I do recall, though, watching the episode, and there was a lot of compelling truths being told by a lot of people that know a lot of information about, the realities of that end of town.
Okay, because, I mean, obviously we're wanting, part of what our inquiry is into looking at how do we ensure that there's a level playing field and that musicians have an opportunity to perform in an environment where we're giving, great experiences, but that the cost is not too high and that there is opportunity for competition. The way things are now,
a lot of that.
So how do we improve make that a reality? How do we give more opportunity for consumers to see more great artists and for more great artists to get up and be able to perform?
Yeah, I see it as it's an incredibly challenging problem. It's going to take a lot of good minds to solve. I'm under no illusion that it's an easy solution and that there are easy answers here. As I see it, there are kind of two categories to the problem that you're scratching at. One is unfair business practices from ticketing companies to consumers. The other is
Can you expand on
artists.
That? My apologies interrupting you. Could you expand on that a little?
Sure. So the first challenge, there's kind of two challenges as I would kind of segment them at least how I do in my mind. One is unfair ticketing practices for consumers, where consumers are having to put up with things like dynamic pricing, drip pricing, tickets being hoarded off, tickets actually going into the resale market sometimes is what we've understood happens. And then the resale market being run by the ticketing company, who then gets to double dip on fees where they can cycle the ticket, like just all of those types of practices where consumers are being left out of, hey, I'm a real fan, I'm here to pay a reasonable price for an artist that I love, and I just want to be able to do it in a reasonable fashion. And so the types of pricing and inventory management practices that are performed that are not in the interests of consumers. That is one category of a problem, and a lot of that I think is driven by a ticketing company. However, they've negotiated their situation, being in a situation now that they are the only ticketing platform available to ticket particular experiences, particularly at particularly large stadiums, which then opens up the field for being creative with those kinds of practices for the benefit of profitability, obviously. And so that's one category. The other category is I think more what the Four Corners episode was scratching at from memory. It's been a few weeks now, I think, since it aired. Yeah. And that was more around, I think, than what you're scratching at now, which is artists really having an opportunity to perform, having a shot in the industry. And a lot of that, as I've seen it, is around understandable, but some negative externalities, perhaps, of vertical integration in the market, where you have the producer, the touring company, the agency management, the owner of the stadium, the owner of the ticketing company, all essentially under one umbrella company, which gives that organization huge power to tell artists how and when and under what conditions they can join the tent of being able to actually perform in front of people. And a consolidation of power and eyeballs, and then being able to take advantage of that vertical integration. However, in all fairness, I'm not in that world of that touring companies and what it's like to manage artists, but it surely does make a lot of sense as to how there's value and obvious moves for businesses to vertically integrate their service offerings, and there would be other benefits of efficiencies, etc.
Do you think that it actually stops others from entering this as a business, or being able to set themselves up and to work in that field, if there is this vertical integration, does it lock others out of working in the industry?
That's what it appears to be.
Thanks, Libby.
Thank you.
Mr. McCurdy or Adam, you're on the recording. I think you started your evidence saying you'd like to see dynamic ticketing banned, and that's in the media articles as well. But you've gone to some other issues like the scalping, the drip pricing, the reselling, which I was not aware of. It just sounds extraordinary if they're going for a double shake of the fees. I'm going to give you a free kick here. What do we need to do as legislators to fix the issue?
As wishy-washy as this sounds, I think human gatherings need to be re-understood and reappreciated as one of, if not the most sacred things that we do as a species. And when we gather together to share common values and to share experiences that we all want to experience together, that is an incredibly sacred thing. And rightfully, the government provides fantastic grants to organisations who facilitate this. They provide huge amounts of money to build large venues and stadiums to facilitate these types of gatherings. And it's beautiful. But to reappreciate that the ticketing company brokers the human role that the ticketing company is then playing. They are the broker of human gatherings. And I know that sounds melodramatic, but it's very true. And I think one of the biggest things the government can do in setting the right tone for the spirit of legislation that will follow is really elevating the
alongside many of these companies that do great things for the industry. Don't get me wrong. Live Nation, for example, world's big leader, the largest live music entertainment group, $23 billion company, does amazing things here in Australia, bringing acts like obviously that we've just had here. You had all your Travis Scotts and your Olivia Rodrigo's and big concerts, which is fantastic. However, when we're in a situation as a festival, an independent Australian festival, and we're looking to bid on talent, the price of that talent just continually gets pushed up by these competing offers of multinationals with deep pockets, and often in occasions where they're dealing with things on a global perspective. So, sure, we might lose a bit of money in Australia, but we will maintain the artist touring on a global scale where they're able to funnel it into arenas and places that they also own and see the margins there. This has just continually pushed artist fees up higher, combined with the pressure of the US dollar going down. It's made it less feasible to get the same lineups that we used to get. So that also leads you to not only paying higher, but if we're getting less artists on that top tier talent or that calibre, that's when the Australian public perception comes in and we're being compared to overseas festivals or other lineups and going, oh, well, why don't we have this or why don't we have that? So it just seems like it's a double-edged sword that's continually pushing in the pressures of, again, the cost of producing the events, the cost of acquiring the talent, and then the expectations from the audience, but also the audience wanting it within a fair price pocket. And it's pushed festivals to a point where we are seeing now, again, the culling of a lot of the smaller grassroots festivals that don't have the backing of multinationals.
And just to give us an example, can you give us a contrast of what you might have paid for an artist, I don't know, pre-COVID versus what a similar, artist now might cost? Because I don't think we have any idea of the sorts of dollars. And I also appreciate if there's, I don't want you to name any names, but if there's something you can tell us publicly, otherwise if there's something you could give us confidentially just to help us understand that picture, that would, each of those would be useful in different ways.
Yeah, perfect. So the impact that we're looking at is at least a 50% rise in the fees that we've traditionally would be paying for artist cost. The reason why this is so impactful is when the artist budgets and the lineup is the main investment that we make in putting these events together. That's where we want to see that money going to artists, to their teams, to performers, obviously the great crew that we have to build out the events. But when we're talking for a large scale festival that might have a lineup budget of, traditionally $3 to $4 million or something, when that is upped by 50%, that's a considerable chunk and weight on the festival. And there's only one real solution, which is then in turn to, look at increasing ticket prices, which then further perpetuates the problem. So, again, it's the hyper-competitive nature and the multinationals that have deep pockets to drive up these prices is I guess, one of the factors there.
Thank you. Just can I ask about the role of international artists versus Australian artists? Because obviously we are here really keen to think about Australian homegrown live music and giving it a platform and taking it to the world. And in one way, you'd think that the extra costs for an international artist might create more opportunities for local artists. So just thinking of that dynamic and just wondering how you think about your role in helping to develop or showcase Aussie artists as well. Can you talk us through that?
I'll quickly jump in, if you don't mind for a sec, Mike. I think what's really important to know about fostering and developing young Australian artists is opportunity. We need to continue to give them opportunity to perform in front of live audiences, and music festivals really provide that opportunity to amplify their audience immeasurably. I think the example that Mike gave earlier about an artist that's been, a small artist that we've cultivated and worked with very closely over the time and now doing 150,000 tickets nationally across the country, he's not just doing that in Australia, but he's headlining major music festivals overseas as well. He's doing, 30 to 40 city tours all over the United States and Europe and the UK. He's a successful export story that we've, provided opportunity for in Australia. The only way we've been able to provide that opportunity is we've had festival brands that have given him a platform. That's one example. There's probably hundreds of other examples that may not have had the international success that he's had, but have been given an opportunity to cut their teeth and perform in front of thousands of people locally, and that really comes through festival offerings. And what we don't want to see is we don't want to see a scenario where only the big festivals survive. We need small festivals to help cultivate a local audience as well, because a healthy festival sector really propels everyone up. It obviously looks after all the contracted workers, the stages, the riggers, the production people, etc. But it also provides additional performance platforms for Australian artists.
I might add to that by saying the great thing about festivals is we've got a captive audience there that is coming for the day of events, and that is where people traditionally and used to discover new music, particularly Australian artists that we put on the bill. You look at an event like, as I mentioned, Beyond the Valley over New Year's Eve, which is 4 days of music, over 80 artists, and strong contingent. I think over 50% of Australian artists on that bill. That is where people will discover new bands, and that is the platform for these artists. And not only that, when you look at our headliners every year, this year we've got Fisher, an Australian artist, bringing in the New Year's Countdown. Last year, Rufus Du Sol. The year before that, Dom Dollar. These are all Aussie icons that have grown with the festival. But it's not just about the headliners, it's about all the different levels of talent that we have on a festival. And festivals are the platform that people, not only discover these artists, but also give the bands an opportunity to perform in different settings that they haven't. When would you get to perform in front of 20,000 people, unless you're at that headline peak of your career? So in terms of this delineation, I also just wanted to talk about, we spoke about the industry being dominated by multinational conglomerates, whatnot. But I think it's the focus on so much international touring happening here in Australia, which means that the consumers are focusing on spending their dollar on all these choices that is happening on the headline touring front, and it's less investment into festivals and not participating in those festivals, which is giving those artists less of a platform to be seen.
Am I okay to do one more?
Yeah, one more, yeah.
Can I ask you about pill testing? You've talked about a national discussion on real-time harm minimisation strategies. What's wrong with the current situation where each state is making those decisions?
I think it would be good to have some consistency nationally, irrespective of where you're putting an event on or a festival on. It would be good to have that health measure included there, available if people wanted to take it up. I think consistency breeds efficiency, and it would be great to see that consistency.
I think I'm one of the few MPs who have spoken about this in federal parliament because I've had deaths occur at a festival near me.
No chance. It's federated system.
Indeed,
Yeah.
but no, and I yes, in.
And I will note, we do think obviously this is, education is key, and we are very pro in support of this. And I will note that, being a NARM-based business, we are very lucky with the support of the state that we have here. I think Victoria's been very open and just in regards to also hearing and listening to the issues we face and trying to find avenues through regional event funds or anything to support our events. And I will say that Victoria's been great in that regard, but I do think that from a federal level, having some consolidation is going to be key.
I don't think it's something the federal government wants to get involved in. But now, look, I've got a couple. Then I'll throw to Ms. Coker. Just on just what you mentioned about how important, Mr. Sofo, the smaller festivals are in terms of a breeding ground for success. Can I extrapolate from that? Do you think our focus, in terms of what this inquiry is trying to achieve, which is the nurturing and preservation and furtherance of live music in Australia, should our focus be on the small to medium regional suburban festival end, as well as of course venues? Should that be our focus rather than the big festivals? Should we be looking to nurture the grassroots, so to speak?
If I can expand on that, I think Australian businesses should be the focus. I feel like Australian businesses are the ones who are building these small festivals, small events. They're Australian promoters, Australian artist managers, etc. So I think that broader Australian music industry person should be the focus of this inquiry, and this and support to Australians doing things for Australians is really important.
Thank you. And the other one I wanted to mention just briefly, Mr. Christidis, you talked about how the artist fees had gone up, and we've heard at length about insurance and other things. Perhaps since post-COVID, so what, we're talking three, God, I can't remember now, 3 years since COVID? Two and a half, 3 years. How has ticketing changed? What has ticketing gone up? Has it sort of stayed the same because of the competitive pressures? Or have ticket prices, doubled, so to speak? I mean, how have ticketing prices changed over the last 3 years?
Right. Well, I'll give you a good example because it's probably good to give some real data insights here. Particularly when we focus on small festivals, what you might consider a small festival might not necessarily be a small festival. We have a touring festival called Grapevine Gathering, which is tours around the winery regions, a single stage event, like a day on the green, but for very much youth focused audience. Grapevine started about 8 years ago and had a ticket price of under $100, and we do about 10 to 15,000 people in all the wine regions. Post-COVID, with the ticket price driving up, Grapevine's baseline price was, at least 50% up on that. And again, that value offering of audience wanting to go out for a single day event in the winery just made it no longer feasible. So that's a festival that has essentially we've had to put a hold on for this year. And I'd consider that, when we say small, medium festival, that is that's a great event. That was a great single stage platform for touring Aussie artists to have that experience. But given the pressures of it, people no longer see the value in spending that new threshold for that experience they may have experienced in the past. So in terms of when you say ticketing pressures, yeah, definitely post-COVID in the last couple of years, we are seeing that price go up. And then it's those festivals that essentially aren't the tentpole events in the calendar or aren't the ones that have the top tier talent are the ones that essentially will be passed on by punters.
So can I get some clarity on that? So using that as an example, then you're saying there's $100 for a festival where you could go to different stages and venue areas, but the costs went up. So was there an attempt made to increase the ticketing price to say 120, 130, but at some stage the sales just didn't occur because people just made the value proposition look, oh, this is just a bit too expensive now, and therefore you decided to cancel the event? Is that what's occurred?
Well, I want to be careful with my terminology here because we have been very reactive. But Grapevine did have a tour in 2023 where ticket sales were severely down, which we believe was a response to the pricing that we needed to adjust that event to make it viable.
And what had to change the pricing to? Because you're saying it was $100. What had it gone to?
Well, when you look at context, pre-COVID it was under $100, and now the final ticket prices were at $150, $160 for final releases to get it up. So again, that 50% increase that we're talking about from pre-COVID prices to post-COVID. For us to make the budget viable, we had to put the ticket price at a place that we need, which then in turn made it not viable for the audience, and we saw a sharp drop-off in the market. So we were heavily impacted with that event last year and then made a conscious call with the current climate to rest the brand for this year. I think that is an example of a great festival that, and when I noted on it's a single stage event. So we bus everyone in nice and early. So the whole audience of 10 to 15,000 is in from the start of the day. And every artist playing on that bill gets their time in the spotlight on the stage. And that has been pivotal performances for artists that have played to those massive audiences. That festival was unable to return this year. A key thing that I'd like to note particularly on that is it's a nationally touring festival. Right now, states are funding based on tourism incentives for events. And it's great to see interest in funding the arts, but we should be funding arts and festivals for art's sake and what they do for the culture of the industry.
Thank you.
As soon as
Ms. Coker has been very patient, and we've only got 4 minutes. I do apologise, Ms. Coker. But if gentlemen, you wouldn't mind keeping your responses as brief as they can be, because I think Ms. Coker's got a few questions.
Look, I've got 2 questions. Firstly, thank you, Pete Sofo and Michael Christidis for being with us today. One of our inquiry's objectives, which I think Ms Templeman has sort of asked you a related question on, is how do we understand how we better create pathways for Australian artists to showcase and develop their skills? What role do you think government has in creating this environment? Like, what can we do in terms of legislation to help? And the other part of that question is, and do any of your festivals, I'm interested in Pitch Music and Arts and Love and Ability Fest, which amazingly you mentioned in your opening raised over $580,000 in funds, which is brilliant. As someone who works with people with disability in my role here, I'm interested in that, but more so from this perspective of giving people, musicians, an opportunity to showcase, develop skills.
So I think what can the federal government do to support these avenues? There's been talk about, ensuring that there are Australian supports on international tours that come to the country. I think we've talked extensively, about festival support, because festivals are breeding grounds for performance opportunities. I think just continual discussion with the sector is really, really important, and continued listening. I think the challenges are there's not one single fix-all for what the industry is facing at the moment. I think it's going to be a little bit of a long tail, and there's a lot of these discussions that are needed. But certainly temporary and targeted support for festivals, as I mentioned earlier in my opening statement. And I think there can be further discussion with industry, so such as the Live Music Performance Association, Australian Festivals Association, etc. I think just a seat at these sorts of tables is really beneficial for us as an industry.
Can I ask you then just about Pitch Music and Arts and Love and Ability Fest in terms of giving people, musicians, an opportunity to step up and show their skills and develop them? Are either of those festivals achieving that aim? How, and if so, how?
Yeah, so Pitch and Ability Fest, sorry, I'm not sure, was there a third one in there?
No, just the two.
Yeah. So Pitch and Ability Fest both have, we have, and Mike, you're probably better to expand on this, but we have Australian music performance quotas, gender quotas, and First Nation quotas, I believe. Mike, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, we have quotas across, I guess, as Pete mentioned, all metrics. But I think when you look at a lineup like Ability Fest, it was an all-Australian, with the exception of one or two artists, it was all-Australian artists that were highlighted there. And we were only able to achieve the results that we did with Ability Fest through the great support of the Victorian and Queensland state governments and what they were able to support to get that event happening. Not only, was it an Australian artist that had that great platform, but also hitting, diverse audiences that weren't exposed to that music, previously, particularly with Pitch Music and Arts as well. Being a multi-day event, again, you have an audience there that is coming across new artists that they haven't seen before, and particularly with the strong contingent of Australian artists. So those types of events where people can discover artists that are on bills either alongside internationals or on bills for the people coming to the event itself is where they're getting those real opportunities.
The quota system sounds quite interesting, and also the support, say, from the Victorian government. It'd be interesting to get some further information on that if you can provide it.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to do that on notice if you wouldn't mind, because we're out of time. Look, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today and your attendance to today's hearing. If you've been asked to provide any additional information or if there's anything else you would like to provide, please forward this to the Secretariat by Friday, 6 December 2024. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence to which you may suggest corrections. Very much appreciate you making the time to speak with us again today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
I now call representatives of TEG Live. We'll wait till you get to the table. We're ripping through today. By way of introduction, I'm Brian Mitchell, Chair of the Committee. I'll ask other members to introduce themselves. I'll start with this.
I'm Libby Coker, member for Corangamite, and my electorate takes in the Bellarine, Surf Coast, wraps around Geelong.
And online, we've got Ms Mackenzie. So we've got Zoe.
Hello,
Yep.
Zoe Mackenzie.
So we've got Zoe.
Zoe Mackenzie, member for Flinders, Mornington Peninsula, Glorious Victoria.
And
Victorians, where I'm from.
there you go.
I'm very familiar with the Surf Coast from the Falls Festival way
in the
back.
day.
Don't get your hopes up because we've got
And I'm
as well,
Susan
so.
Templeman, member for Macquarie, not from Victoria, from the Blue Mountains and Hawkesbury outside Sydney, and I'm also the Special Envoy for the Arts.
As these proceedings are public, they are being broadcast and recorded by Hansard. If you wish to have evidence heard in private, please let the committee know and we will consider your request. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I wish to advise you this hearing is a formal proceeding of the Parliament. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. If you object to answering a question, please state the reasons for your objection and the committee will consider the matter. We now invite you to make an opening statement if you wish.
Thank you. And look, TG welcomes the...
Sorry, I've done it again. I don't think I've asked you for the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity which is before the committee?
Of course.
Sorry.
Tim McGregor, I'm the Global Head of Touring at TEG.
Thank you, Tim. I did to the previous witnesses. I must be hidden in the text. I've just glanced over that. My apologies. We're in your hands if you'd like to make an opening statement.
Thank you so much for the additional opportunity to provide feedback to the Standing Committee regarding the challenges and opportunities within the Australian live music industry. TG's business in Australia, we're active in ticketing through Ticketek, and we also have live music promotion businesses in TG Live, TG Dainty, Handsome Tours, Laneway, TG Van Egmont and others. We don't own any venues in Australia, although we are the lessee of the Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney. The day-to-day operations of Kudos Bank Arena are outsourced to ASM Global, which is a venue manager.
So what's that called?
Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney.
What did that used to be called before it got the branding name? What was it?
It's been, All Phones Arena. It's been...
What was it built as?
Sydney Superdome.
Thank you very much.
There you go. Yep. TG employs approximately 500 plus people, and we engage thousands across the tours and the events we promote and the venues that we ticket. Notably, around 80% of TG's tours have an Australian support artist, something we're very passionate about. We're also very passionate about the headline tours of major Australian artists and smaller Australian artists, but examples are Delta Goodrem, Guy Sebastian, Hilltop Woods, Middle Kids, Pete Murray, the Kid Leroy we're currently touring at the moment, Tina Arena and various others. We're highly active in the festival space with Laneway Festival, Knotfest, Out to Lunch and Palm Tree Festivals, and we're a member of the Australian Festivals Association. We promoted the bushfire charity Firefight at Accor Stadium in February 2020, which generated a donation of over $11 million towards bushfire relief. Little did we know that only 3 weeks later we'd all be completely shut down due to the COVID pandemic, which saw a 98% drop in our revenue across the industry that was felt. Nevertheless, we retained our full workforce throughout the pandemic, continued to invest in the live economy, and continued to work with government on solutions to reactivate the live entertainment industry. I just wanted to mention a little bit about the industry in Australia, because there has been obviously a lot of discourse about this, and I think it's good to get on the front foot. The key market participants in the live music sector in Australia include the artists and their representatives, the promoters, ticketing agents and the venues. Most of the largest venues are owned by state governments. There are a range of market participants in live music events, ticketing of live music events, including a number of international firms, as well as a strong contingent of smaller independent players. For example, whilst Ticketek and Ticketmaster Moshtix are long-standing market participants, there are a range of independent ticketing providers such as Austix, Humanitix, Megatix, in addition to self-service or white label systems that enable venues to source ticketing services like Tessitura and some of the arts facilities. New entrants to the Australian industry face no systemic barriers to entry, in our view. As an example, a global player, Access, which is owned by Anschutz Entertainment Group, AEG, the world's second largest entertainment promoter behind Live Nation Entertainment, has recently entered Australia and New Zealand and has been participating in tenders for venues. It has committed significant investment to the Australian and New Zealand markets through the opening of local offices and employing local staff, in addition to venue commitments such as acquiring the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney. Despite being a new player in Australia and New Zealand, we understand they've been invited to every major ticketing tender. So in TG's experience, the ticketing and live promotion sectors are highly competitive. Pricing and other aspects of live music events are largely driven by the artist and the venues, which I'll explain. From a promoter perspective, which is really the world I come from, we're intermediaries and we largely take direction, and I'm thinking particularly in terms of concert touring that are going to venues. Festivals are slightly different, but if you're thinking about major tours that are going into Kudos Bank Arena, the Hordern Pavilion, Rod Laver Arena, etc., we largely take direction and must always receive approval from the artist representatives, which are typically agents, professional agents that act on behalf of the artists, in relation to the structure, the operations and the economics of the tour. This includes the choice of venue, includes ticket prices, VIP packages, if any, premium ticketing options, sponsorship, show production requirements include lighting, audio, video, the size of the tour party, hotel and airline selections, and marketing. They're literally involved in every aspect. We make recommendations, of course, with our local knowledge and expertise and preferences in respect of all these elements, but ultimately the artist must approve them, and often the artist is highly prescriptive about them. They'll send us an email saying this is exactly how we want you to pitch for this tour in a competitive and sometimes non-competitive when they're coming to us directly. Promoters enter into contracts with the artist which typically involve a minimum financial guarantee and typically an additional 85 to 90% share of the profit going to the artist. Sometimes there is even a greater share that is going to the artist. So promoters will typically be responsible for 100% of the downside risk. We carry all of the risk and we receive between, say, typically 10 to 15% of the profit. So the artist typically determines the venues they'll perform. The majority of the venues have exclusive ticketing arrangements in place. It's not within the promoter's control, it's not within the artist's control, but those exclusive ticketing arrangements in place, and then promoters take 100% downside risk to get a 10 to 15% of the profit. The most important financial component of the deal with the artist is the box office ticket sales that can be generated from promoters marketing the show. As a result, promoters will seek to manage the risk and drive a return on the investment by ensuring the artist only performs the shows which have been guaranteed by the promoter and no other shows in market across the tour period. Accordingly, it is standard practice for artists and promoters to negotiate and agree to time and territory exclusivity provisions in relation to these guaranteed shows. So there's not cannibalisation if other shows are popping up. The specific exclusivities will vary from tour to tour, but typically would require no other shows to be announced in the territory until the guaranteed shows have been completed. This is primarily for the promoter's benefit because we have 100% downside risk, but the artist also is entitled to a share of the profit, and naturally we would encourage them to try and generate as much profit from the tours that we've committed and guaranteed. Artists generally control ticket pricing and other revenue opportunities, determining which opportunities promoters are to provide them with, which might include sponsorship, might include VIP package offerings, it might include premium ticketing. For events that receive government funding, and there are a few, there may be additional exclusivities that the artist needs to adhere to in order to achieve tourism-related outcomes that are typically intrinsic to such funding. For example, not to perform within a certain period, territory or state for a period of time. TEG does not use any resale platforms other than those available from the primary ticket seller, e.g. Ticketek Marketplace or Ticketmaster Resale, which allow customers to resell tickets to others, for example, if they can no longer attend the event. Ticketek Marketplace has a 10% cap on the face value of the ticket, and it does provide surety to us as promoters and to the artist that the patron that the tickets receive will be valid. So, in terms of the ticketing mechanics, which is adjacent to me with the Ticketek team, but I wanted to talk about it with you. Ticketing companies are also intermediaries. They are agents for the seller, which in the concert touring context is usually the venue, and more infrequently a promoter or an event organiser directly at what we call a greenfield site where there's no ticketing company in place. So ticketing services include ticket sales platforms, the website and app, agencies, box office, marketing and analytics services for venues and the hirers, operational deployment of staff on event day to oversee all aspects of ticketing, including access control, venue and promoter reporting. As I mentioned earlier, most of the large Australian venues, stadia, arenas, entertainment centres, convention centres, are ultimately state government owned, and the tender processes are conducted under strict probity requirements. Ticketing contracts are awarded via terms set out by the venue in their RFPs. Venues typically require an exclusive arrangement, although some may require optionality that may include a provision for a certain number of events to be ticketed by an alternative provider. Ticketing fees typically form part of the RFP response and are negotiated with the venue, who has final approval. The venue sets the terms for the ticketing tender. It sets the terms of the ticketing company's contract, including whether or not the contract is exclusive and the fees to be paid. Venues consider the commercial arrangements from ticketing companies as a critical revenue base that supports operational capability and capital asset management. Ticketing is highly competitive, particularly in relation to technology innovation. products such as in-app ticketing to reduce scalping.
So I'm just going to... do you have much more to go?
No, a couple of minutes, yep. And key commercial terms such as rights payments. Ticketing contracts are highly contestable, and venues ensure that contract terms include specific obligations for an orderly transition to an incoming ticketing provider at the expiry of the existing term. As mentioned earlier, whilst Ticketek and Ticketmaster, Moshix are long-standing market participants, there are a range of other providers, including Austix, Humanitix, etc., in addition to the self-service systems that are available. More recently, again, Access has entered the market, the Australian New Zealand market, and is actively competing for ticketing contracts. And for clarity, the ticketing company does not set the ticket prices. This is a decision of the artist via its representatives, who provide direction and approval to the promoter.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive introductory statement. I appreciate that. I'm going to throw straight to Ms. Ms. Templeman from Macquarie, who is our Special Arts Envoy. So,
yeah, thank you. Thank you for going through that. There's a couple of things I just want to try and clarify. And that is, I don't understand all the different fee extras that are included. The list I had was service fees, booking fees, transaction fees, facility fees, infrastructure fees. Are you able to give me a breakdown, or if not, could you take that on notice?
I could take it on notice, but generally speaking, there are, again, the fees that are within a ticket price, fees that are negotiated with the venue and the ticketing company through the tender process. And they may include a booking fee, may include a facility fee, an infrastructure levy. It may include a charitable component that an artist might want, and it allows to be able to do that, to have a charitable aspect. On the outside of the ticket, the outside charges, typically it's service and handling fees or transaction fees are per transaction, not per ticket. That's the general rule, but venue by venue and ticketing company by ticketing company, it can differ. In the larger venues that we typically tender for, there's a standardisation usually that is dictated by the venues.
It would be great to have a definition breakdown of each of those, just for our clarity. Can I ask you then, just in terms of things that are added on, one of the things the industry has been talking about locally is mirroring what's happening in the UK about having an additional fee that is used, a bit like you talked about a charitable fee, but a levy that would be used as a pool to support small music venues, so that we're getting that, opportunities at that end. Does TEG have a view on that idea?
Yeah, I think probably the response to that really is, I think that there are a range of different measures we think are going to be important to support the local music industry. We are interested in that concept. We've seen what is happening in the UK. We note that it's voluntary, and we do note that a very large artist, one that we're touring locally, Katy Perry, has agreed to do that in the UK. And I think that sounds really great in theory. I think the detail is going to be important to understand how that money is administered, where it is deployed, on what basis it's deployed. I think that the devil will be in the detail there. I think also, having a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to it is quite challenging. So a voluntary basis, and some of the really big artists, I think will likely be interested in that, and generally speaking, their ticket prices are much higher, and therefore there is more to share around. But based on the economics that I described to you before, promoters being asked to share, part, which might be, let's say it's $1 per ticket, when it all is said and done, we might make $5 a ticket from a $100 ticket. We've got very little, if any, to share. So coming from an artist to be able to do it on a voluntary basis, interested in principle, we'd like to see a bit of the detail behind that.
And are you involved in the discussions? These are discussions that are happening at an industry level in Australia. Are you a party to those discussions? I'm
on the Executive Council of Live Performance Australia, so we are talking about this regularly, yes. Yeah,
well, we would encourage you to keep talking about that, or do more. Thank you for that. The other thing that I wanted to ask about is a bit around automation. I would have thought that automation is playing a role and bringing down costs in terms of administering. Is that the case? Are things likely to flow through to consumers that will make a substantive difference to consumers?
And that really is very much a ticketing question. I think yes, Ticketek is certainly looking at new technologies as they are coming through. AI obviously is one that is we're looking at very closely and trying to understand how that might create cost efficiencies, operational efficiencies. It's a little early to tell, how that might, but certainly there is a team on it within Ticketek trying to examine what that might look like and how it might be deployed into the ticketing processes. Yes.
The other issue that's obviously around is dynamic pricing.
Yep.
And my look, that is something from what I've read that presumably you're saying artists make the decision at some point in the process. An artist might choose to do that, or you would put that to them to consider. Can you describe how those decisions are made? I'm making assumptions based on what you've said, but
yes.
If I could just understand a decision to do dynamic pricing, ultimately whose decision that is, and why would you, as the ticketing provider, and I appreciate that is the
yes.
people who sit alongside you. But presumably, if there's dynamic pricing, it's a bit like real estate. If the price that's paid is higher, the cut that you get is higher too.
Not so much in the ticketing world. No, ticketing world, the fee structures. But I think dynamic pricing, I guess, is nascent in this country. I mean, there's no algorithmic dynamic pricing, at least I'm not aware of. Venues are asking about it. They want to understand how technology might be developed so that you could have virtually seat by seat, adjustments being able to be made, but it's not at that stage at this point in time. In other markets, in the US and in the UK, it's certainly heating up, and there's been plenty of press about that. The ability to be able to yield manage by having a platform like that which can adjust in real time. We, both Ticketmaster and Ticketek, have manual, pricing platforms which are called Ultimate for Ticketek and Platinum for Ticketmaster, and they involve a manual adjustment that is going based on, again, artist approval to enter into that sort of premium ticket pricing, and moving in bands which are, an observation of demand will make changes, but. That is not unusual to how a venue might be managed from an artist's perspective, from a promoter's perspective when tickets go on sale, to observe demand and to make adjustments based on that demand.
When you say it's not unusual, and you say it's not unusual but it's nascent in Australia,
yep.
How long has that sort of demand management been going on then?
Really for a long time. What we call maybe a thing called flexi scaling, a promoter.
So do you mind me asking, when you say a long time, are we talking years? What are we?
15 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be, when we present a ticketing matrix, a ticketing plan to an artist for approval, we might see that we've got 1,000 tickets at the top ticket price, and they might say, can we hold off some of the tickets in the lower ticket price to see if there's more demand for those higher ticket prices, and then let's see if we can adjust them to the higher ticket price if the demand is there. If the demand isn't there, we may adjust the top ticket price down to a lower ticket price in order to continue the sales process.
Okay.
So it's quite manual, yep.
So just in terms of dynamic pricing, just to clarify, it is something that you see has a place in ticketing?
Yes, I think it does. I mean, in the United States and the UK, it has been used extensively in order to deal with the secondary market in those territories. The secondary market, scalping, is not as big a factor in Australia. There is some, but it's certainly not at the level that occurs in the UK and the US. But naturally, artists who are coming from those markets are asking us, what are we doing to help control the secondary market? And so they wish to have an ability to be able to reprice in order to deal with demand, to make sure that they're dealing with the secondary market, not inflating ticket prices by reselling tickets at a higher ticket price. So certainly it's been a methodology used to combat secondary ticketing in those markets.
How does it combat? I can certainly see how I can understand an artist's frustration that they've sold a ticket for $100, whereas some scalper sells it for $200, and they think, well, there's $100 I could have made.
That's right.
I get that, but I don't see how, if they sell the ticket themselves for $200, how does it stop the scalping? how does it stop somebody buying a ticket for $100 which they'll resell for $200?
Because, of course, the secondary market is obviously looking to maximise the return that they get by buying tickets at face value, by inflating them to as high as they can. I guess the methodologies used, Ticketmaster Platinum does it extensively in the US in particular, is to have prices which are the only way you get access to that inventory is paying a much higher price. Of course, it's far less attractive to the secondary market.
It's not dynamic pricing just to have a higher price at the start. I mean, dynamic pricing is the first people to buy tickets get the lower price, and as the fewer tickets are available, the price goes up. So scalpers, and they often do, get the first bunch of tickets. They get them at the low end, and therefore the poor punters, or they get left with the dynamic price tickets at the high end. But there's still a market for people scalpers who have paid $50 for a ticket. They say, hey, well, rather than paying $350 on the Ticketek dynamic pricing schedule, I'll sell it for $300.
Yeah. So those platforms are designed to be able to adjust before scalpers can get access to that inventory.
Sorry.
At least to have a level of ticket that's available.
That's okay. And so the Assistant Treasurer has made it clear he wants to see an end to dynamic pricing where consumers are midway through purchases and suddenly see that the price is rising as they're hanging on. But you're suggesting it plays a role. What other measures can you put in place to reduce bulk purchasing by people who intend to scalp them?
Yeah, so I mean, there's various technologies that all ticketing companies have adopted, whether it's fully in-app purchasing, which, the barcodes are not then disclosed until the day of the event. So that means it's very difficult to transact those tickets, if at all. So, and also creating platforms where there is an exchange of tickets for people who no longer need the tickets, and doing it on a basis which is in a controlled environment and ensures that those tickets are valid. So there's various methodologies to try and combat that, but it's a constant challenge, no question. Yeah.
Okay, I should let someone else ask some questions, Chair.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking. I mean, a simple thing for me with scalping would be non-transferability. That the person who buys the ticket is the only valid person who's able to use it. I mean, I don't know how you.
Yeah. So Ticketek Marketplace, and I believe Resale do the same. Is it that gives you surety that the person who is transacting the ticket is the owner of the ticket, and so exchanging it to another person is effective and safe. There are resale platforms in this country that we've had absolute horror stories of people who have bought tickets through those platforms, turned up to the show to see their favourite artist. They've paid a lot of money to get access to that ticket, and it's not valid. Then they're turned away at the box office. We have to find some other arrangement for them. It's devastating.
Can I just say, I don't normally buy resale tickets, but I was overseas. I happened to have a free night, like a very short notice, unexpectedly a free evening, and I searched for a ticket to a particular performance, and it was really interesting. I was in the US, in Washington, and it was really interesting to see on these reselling platforms trying to work out which ones were legit, and it was also at that time where the world's internet went down, and we had all that internet stuff happening, that big crash in July. That assurance, and I guess we look at it from a perspective of consumers, providing, ensuring that the platforms meet a certain standard. And that just does raise one thing. You talked about there's no barrier to entry for ticketing providers and presumably for resellers. What regulatory barriers to entry would make it a more secure environment for consumers?
I think you're focusing on the secondary market and resellers. I think there have been steps taken, whether it's legislative caps on resale at 10%, and we have a huge education process that we continually engage in to encourage people not to buy from unauthorised outlets. I think your experience in the US is very much about that market. The secondary market is enormous in the United States. It's been driven largely, I think, by sport that has created this ecosystem for the secondary market, and that's now moved into music. It's highly prevalent. We hope that doesn't come to Australia, and that's why we have platforms like Ticketmaster Marketplace and Ticketek Marketplace and Ticketmaster Resale, which are authorised resale, marketplace exchange platforms, which give confidence to consumers in buying for those platforms.
I could probably get this from corporate documents, but I'll ask you while you're here, Tim. TEG Live, what percentage of the business is Ticketek and your ticketing stuff, and what percentage is your touring and other aspects? Just so I get an idea of who's the gorilla in your zoo.
Yeah, it does vary from year to year, and we have this always the internal challenge to see who is growing at but it would probably be 60-40, something like that. Yeah, it's a Ticketek to ticketing to promotion.
Okay, thank you.
We'd have outside of what I'm talking about in terms of music, have a very large sport promotion business, large family entertainment experiences business as well. So alongside music.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker.
Thanks, Tim, for being with us. As federal government, we do want to promote and support Australian artists. So I'm interested in the comments that were made. I'm not sure if they were made by yourself, but at your previous hearing on in July this year.
Yes.
And in that, you've mentioned audience interest in live music depends on apps like Spotify and streaming platforms, and talking about the use of algorithms to capture a quota. And actually ensure we get a fair portion of Australian content.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if you could expand on that, and if you think government has any role to create this, a dynamic where Australian artists actually do get a reasonable amount of airplay.
I came up listening to Triple J, going to music festivals that featured predominantly Triple J artists, the Big Day Out, Livid, those sorts of festivals. It's a long time ago now, and things have completely changed. The advent of Spotify and even TikTok, the algorithms are set up to create audiences and to really concentrated audiences for artists. So follow around your interests and to develop your profile based on that. So if those algorithms are going to have much more sort of international content rather than local content, then naturally that's where consumer interests are going to go. And in my observation, that's what's happening. It's those two platforms that are enormously influential in what music people are listening to.
And have you got any suggestions to how a role government can play? Is there a role for government in actually talking to the industry about how do we get, a better balance?
Yeah, I think, it would be interesting to explore whether it's possible to have, I'm not sure how it works with the Spotify algorithm, having a level of Australian content that's attached to it. It seems rather tricky for an international entity like that, but, that seems to me to be something worth exploring. Obviously I've heard of the interest in having local support acts on every international tour. And again, in principle, we're open to that. As I mentioned, we have 85% of our tours do have have a local artist on it. So we're already keen to do that wherever we possibly can. Ultimately, as I've mentioned before, it is up to the artist, who they dictate who the support acts are, whether they even have a support act. So it sometimes can be a bit tricky, but we're very open to concepts like that if we can. But it is difficult to know how government can really make an impact other than having an influence on consumer behaviour. I'm not sure that's the role of government, but and we are seeing it move so rapidly, it would be difficult to keep up.
Yeah, the technology is definitely moving quickly. I just want to also ask you, being in a regional area, and we have we've had many large festivals, and they do create great economic benefit and employment, but we've seen a number of them, including the Falls Festival, basically no longer in operation. Is there anything from your perspective that how do we actually continue sustaining those type of festivals in our regional areas with the pressures that we have on cost of living, climate change as well, and really with the dominant group of, constant concert organisers taking more control of the sector to some extent?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we are. I think in the festival space, there's some very strong independent promoters. Untitled, who have Beyond the Valley and their suite of festivals, and that one in particular is a destination festival that's there's a rite of passage element to it, I think, which was what the Falls was all about. I think the cost and the effort, and even in a sense the programming, I think, for those festivals has to keep evolving to meet the audiences. I think there is a little bit too much focus on just being able to take an event to a regional area, and it should work on its merits without thinking about the programming needing to be of a sufficient standard and calibre that is going to attract an audience to often spend a lot of money, thousands of dollars, and to travel great distances, and to find 4 or 5 friends to go with them. It's not easy to do that, and it's I think some of the festivals that are no longer with us, I think, have struggled with some of their programming decisions and some of the challenges they've faced, and they've all been very good operators, a lot of them, but the costs related to bringing in big headliners has increased. The Australian dollar is not in a great place. All of these things, sort of the confluence of issues, has meant that I think it hasn't met the consumer interest, and so targeted support for certain festivals makes sense to me, particularly ones that are generating great economic benefit to regional areas. And I think
the good thing is the federal government, we are doing that.
Yes.
Particularly for regional festivals, and ones that are independent, which is a great thing. And just finally, I just wanted to ask you, in your submission, you discussed how international artists may skip Australia due to costs and expenses. And does this absence create opportunity for Australian artists?
Yeah, and look, I guess during COVID we had, with international borders closed, there were lots of opportunities for Australian artists across that period, which I've got to say is extended, throughout, even with the international artists coming back into Australia. But the challenge with bringing a lot of international artists to Australia is the Australian dollar being where it is, and we're not competing so much with other promoters chasing those tours. We're competing with other territories that are more proximate to them, bigger markets for them, and much in terms of their share of the economics are far greater because they don't have all the cost and expense and time of coming to Australia. So it is a big challenge, and we are still an important market. The live part of most artists' revenue split is really strong. It's important to come here and to service the audience, but we are seeing that sometimes they'll come and they'll do the eastern seaboard only, because it's really difficult to extend all the way across to Perth and across to Adelaide or down into New Zealand. So, you're seeing some very large artists that are taking that just to do Sydney and Melbourne even, and you're seeing some smaller touring artists that are just focusing on the eastern seaboard to come in. So promoters are having to be really innovative and clever, and sometimes they get support from government to assist them. Sometimes we have very good sponsorship arrangements which help us if the artists will allow us to do it, but it is a challenge.
Does it create a niche for Australian artists who are coming up to be able to showcase their talents? To say, for example, for you, do you see that as an opportunity?
Yeah, I do. I think there is, but I don't think I think the opportunity has always been there. I think the recent challenges for a lot of Australian artists is about, there are a number of festivals that are not proceeding, which means there's less opportunities to be, on those festival lineups, which is really disappointing. I think there's a change in consumer behaviours in pubs and clubs. We are seeing, and I've heard it anecdotally from people we work with, that 18 to 24-year-olds are not going and drinking at those pubs and clubs in the way they used to 5, 10, 15 years ago. So having a small venue which has a capacity of 400 people, with 400 people who are not going to the bar to have 3, 4, 5 drinks, makes the financial model for those businesses very challenged. So that has been a problem for local. I think targeted support for some of these things seems to make sense to me to try and assist. I also think that we were at the ARIAs the other night, and seeing the international success of Australian artists such as Dom Dollar and Fisher and Rufus de Sol, we substantially over-index in terms of our global impact for Australian artists. It is quite stunning, So I also think we should be regarding it as an export opportunity for a number of these artists to go into these larger markets, and then that I guess also helps with things like Spotify and TikTok on a global level. It's far more. There's a lot of opportunities to go to those larger markets, and perhaps that needs to be focused on to give some targeted support to artists to give them the opportunity to go and spend. Usually, the months and months on end that you need to commit to those territories in order to gain traction and play shows. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly, anything final? We've got about a minute before that.
No, I'm good,
I think Ms. Mackenzie's fine. Yep. Look, I'll stick to being punctual. Mr. McGregor, thank you for your attendance at today's hearing. If you've been asked to provide any additional information or if there's anything else you would like to provide, please forward this to the Secretariat by Friday, 6 December 2024. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence to which you may suggest corrections. Thank you for taking the time to come in today and speak to us. Much appreciated. And your release. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
There being no further witnesses scheduled, I ask a member to move that the committee stand adjourned.
Happy to move that.
Thank you, Ms. Templeman. So moved, so carried. We're done.